Hello everyone, and welcome to another video. I really wanted to do kind of a generic, fluffy, let's talk about how things are going kind of video today. This would be Final Fantasy X-2, but this next episode is on hold because I just bought myself a new capture card that hopefully, if all things go right, will allow the quality of the videos I've been putting out to go through the roof. I've really begun to notice the last Q&A we did, or one of the Halloween videos I did this week, people pointed out, hey look, the Halloween footage you shot back when the game originally came out is all this really smooth, buttery FPS, and now look at how your game client's going. I guess it slowly snuck up on me. I do want to resolve that, and for those of you a bit out of the loop with what's going on with YouTube in general at the moment, they just rolled out the ability for users to post 60 FPS videos. This was previously capped at 29 FPS, and it is a huge difference. You need to use Google Chrome or Internet Explorer at the moment to see the change, but it's phenomenal. I would love to be one of those people that's able to do it, so I'm trying something out, and that does mean 10-2, the next episode or so, I guess, we're just going to have to wait for, but when it comes back, it will be in 1080p, it will be looking a lot better than it ever did, which I'm kind of excited about. On the other side of things, with Guild Wars 2, there is so much going on, I feel completely swamped. One of the videos I was sort of umming and erring, I didn't know if I wanted to do, was on the gem store conversion issue we had last week, another big thing people sort of wanted to rage about. I was considering putting out my say, but I've got to be honest guys, it wasn't an issue I really cared about that much. I very rarely, if ever, converted my gold into gems. The only times I ever did it was if I was desperately in need of something like a Bank Access Express or Revive Orb, and I didn't have any on my character, so I would convert just a tiny amount of gold into gems so I could buy a Bank Access Express and get whatever I wanted, maybe revive myself somewhere. That's the only time I ever did, and so while I appreciate the concerns that people had, while to me it's obviously a money grab, I didn't care that much. I guess I'm a little bit jaded when it comes to companies. I expect them to nickel and dime us. People talking about the fact that the thresholds were for amounts of gems over what you would actually end up paying in the gem store, just so you'd end up having to get those extra gems, and then you'd have a surplus, and then you'd want to use the gem store even more, so that you were even more inclined to put money into the game. These kinds of practices were already there in game, and because it was a system I never participated in that much, I just kind of took it for what it was. It's one of those things that I understand, and I think the community is justified in backlashing over, but that I also feel if it was just this way since launch, no one would know or care, right? It was this really awesome, nice convenience we had for Guild Wars 2 that ultimately didn't have to be there in the first place. And that was my kind of general views, very shortly surmised. But one good thing that I guess did come out of it was, once again, ArenaNet looked at all of the controversy, they looked at the outrage, and in the patch to the game yesterday, in case you guys missed it, that was the October 30th patch, this Thursday that's just passed, they did add the ability to enter your own custom amounts for gem conversions once again. Their stance has always been, oh, we only did this because it was confusing to people, because people only paid converted in large bulks anyway. We decided we'd do it this way, and I guess since you guys really want the old method as well, we'll add a little custom thing. So they have given us what we want. I think the main thing that got people so angry, and that I think was worse, is their excuse for why they did it. Obviously, they're trying to hide the fact that this is a way of nickel and diming us. It really is, and you could just be honest, right? Like, it wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't hate you for it, and the worst possible excuse they could give is we're doing it because it's confusing. Like, they cannot use that answer ever again. Using new players and confusing mechanics as scapegoats has gone far enough. Whether they were justified in the first place with many of their new player experience changes, short-sighted or broken as they may have been when they first went in, that whole line of thinking, we're doing it because of new players, because it's confusing, because we think that you have IQs of 60, that you're 3-year-olds, they can't do it anymore because people are just going to rage, and that made my heart sink when I saw that that was their excuse. I was like, God damn it. Anyway, it's fixed, and that was a pretty big patch. No one's really talking about it. I thought I would mention it. Other stuff that's going on, Guild Wars 2 is now no longer a $50 game. It is a $20 game. You can take two angles here. Again, you can be all depressing about it and say, oh, they have to sell it for $20 so that they can actually keep getting new players in. Or you can be a little bit more optimistic and look at this as a price drop so that they can angle themselves into a position where a fully priced boxed product later down the line as an addition to the game, like, I don't know, an expansion, will be more readily accepted by new players. They only dropped $20 in the original game, and now they're happy to go $50 for the expansion. expansion. That's honestly what I think that they're doing. In either case, I think dropping it to $20 again will be even more new players. I think it was a smart time to finally do this change, even if this supposed expansion doesn't exist, just because they have just come out of the new player experience stuff. They have just come out of launching it in China, and overall it just seems like a worthwhile time to drop the game to 20. Interestingly enough, it is now cheaper if you want to do it in bulk. It is now cheaper to buy Guild Wars 2 as a new account to get like storage space for mules for character slots than it is to just stay on the same account. And I guess that sort of works in many ways, because a lot of people don't want to buy another account because then they get stripped of all their achievements or their ascended gear, everything that they've ever really worked on. But getting lots of accounts is a little bit more possible now. Hilariously, buying a full copy of Guild Wars 2 is now just 400 gems more expensive than buying the digital deluxe upgrade, which gives you the Heroes Band and the Misfire Wolf. Some people are saying that's a really stupid purchase. It is very heavily priced, but I don't really mind. I mean, it is an extravagance. It's an extra thing. It's unlocking a new skill on Elite skill. I think people will still pay for it, and they may as well just leave it as it is. So I talked about how I am split in a lot of directions at the moment. Life is pretty hectic with the series I'm putting out, and considering Season 2 is now returning, I will tell you guys, obviously I can't talk about it at all until Tuesday, but I have now played the next patch. Things are kind of insane, I'll say that much. There was a leak, I guess you could say. It's not really a leak, but over with KhongZhong, they did an interview, an article about the next Living World patch for the Chinese player base, and online you can actually look at a selection of screenshots from the new update, which ArenaNet haven't released. So these go in addition to stuff with the trailer, and there are some very cool things on there, such as some concept art showing the glory of Tyria among other packed airships flying in the sky above an area that seems to resemble the new map. That is bonkers! The Glory of Tyria, if you guys don't remember, is the giant Deus Ex Machina airship that randomly appeared at the end of the personal story, was only hinted at and very slightly prodded at during the story, that ultimately ended up killing Zaitan. You know, the whole point of Guild Wars 2 is, how do we kill Zaitan? It ended up being this giant airship. This should have been a huge part of the story. It was massively glossed over. It was one of the biggest crimes that the personal story committed, and ever since the personal story finished and we've had Living World stuff, the Pact hasn't been involved, Trahearne hasn't been involved, and this giant weapon, the ultimate arm of force owned by the Pact, has not been mentioned at all, and now we see it. The Pact are back, Trahearne is back, and the glory of Tyria is there in that screenshot. You can find a link in the description to an album of all the many screens, and for many, 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 many other reasons, Tuesday is going to be pretty ridiculous for us. You'll just have to wait, I guess, sorry. So that's about it. I wanted to round the video off with a little bit of a Q&A. There weren't many questions in the last video. I think I foolishly titled it, Why is Guild Wars 2 so casual? Because it just brought a lot of negativity. No one really had many legit questions, but I do have a few here. One thing we touched on in the previous Q&A as well was the idea of fixing world versus world. I came out with a big sweeping change that is pretty much impossible for them to do, but would be very interesting in my eyes, and that was the idea of removing the AoE cap on many skills, or at least upping them significantly. Most naysayers to this comment were that this still wouldn't fix stacking, basically, because of retaliation. Because retaliation is a thing, yes, you may have this elementalist who casts a meteor shower on a giant stack, but because retaliation is so easy to get, because people can blast in all the light fields that Guardians throw out, you know, you're going to melt pretty much instantly by the way retaliation works. For those of you who don't know how it works, because it is slightly one of those obscure things that it's worth noting, retaliation will tick damage on you, not based on the strength of the ability you use. You could have used an ability that only did 1 damage. It will tick damage on you every time you tick damage on someone else, and the number that you get hit with is based on the target's power level. It has nothing to do with yours. So this is why engineers, okay, KhongZhong engineers, they throw their grenades. They use 1 ability that throws out 8 little grenades that each can cleave 3 targets or something, right? These grenades will then tick someone with retaliation 8 times instantly and really chunk the engineer down, even though they're not necessarily hitting that much damage with the grenades themselves. They're doing their damage with the conditions. So if you think about that in the way that retaliation works, you cast a meteor shower, it's millions and millions and millions of little ticks across loads and loads of targets, and that's what melts you down instantly. Retaliation's a good point. Maybe stacks still would be preserved in that case, and I would propose then that you would probably have to change other stuff too. Retaliation itself could have some kind of rework, in my opinion, that made it both more interesting for PvE gameplay and less overpowered in these world versus world situations. I still think the general concept of removing the cap would be interesting at any rate. One little bit of news as well on the world versus world topic that I haven't talked about at all on the channel, but it was mentioned, proposed, it might not ever happen, is that there are no longer going to be server-based matchups, but instead guild alliance-based matchups. And this idea, for many reasons, is a phenomenal one. If they do eventually take world versus world in that direction, we'll see things go very differently there, and it could be exciting stuff for the game type, but we'll have to see. Anyway, let's move on to the questions. The first one comes from the C1 ass, or the class, who says, hey WP, what do you think about some people in the community keep playing this game when it just seems they have nothing good to say about it? Do you think they actually still enjoy the game and just want to moan a lot, or do you think they don't want their time and effort to have gone to waste, or perhaps some other reason? I think on some level, everyone has to have enjoyed the game at some point. On some level, everyone feels some connection to a community with the game, and there is something that's still holding them to it, as negative as they can be. I've certainly met a lot of people in my life who just seem to really enjoy complaining. Everything about them is negativity, but I do think there is ultimately some passion, some joy, something deep within them that still holds them to the game. I know it can seem that way, especially when you look through the forums and you just see these miserable people. Every single post they make is some kind of complaint. They never seem to see the light of day, but I think there is something that at least compels them to be a part of that community. Beyond that, they're just people with serious psychological issues, right? And I'm not saying they don't exist, I'm just saying they're probably a little bit rarer than you'd get the impression of from your encounters with your average Guild Wars 2 player. Along the same kind of topic, I did get another question. Again, the last Q&A was called, why is Guild Wars 2 so casual? This guy, Akasaurus Rex, says, why do you always sound so down on Guild Wars 2, WP? Sometimes you really go on about the downsides. You're one of the best Guild Wars 2 critics and fans out there, but have you ever thought about making a vid about the good things in Guild Wars 2? For all the bashing it gets, after over 2 years, the game is still filled with players, given the troubles that WildStar has had, the anti-casual game. I think Guild Wars 2 has stood up pretty well. You know, it's true. I really think that Guild Wars 2 is doing very well as an MMO. You look at some stats that I believe there was a post about Mumble stats, was it? Or something? Top played games on Mumble, or just things that give a general insight into the kind of stuff people are playing. And Guild Wars 2 frequently appears higher than many of the other new MMOs that have come out that people speculated would take huge hits. I remember seeing really worrying things on WildStar subreddit very shortly after launch about how people would do a command in chat and they would find that there were only like 40 other people online in their entire server. And I think Guild Wars 2 really paid off by going so left-wing with many of its directions. The thing is that all these great things we all already know and we all already appreciate, and these were things we were talking about pre-launch and we were hyped about just as they were first introduced to the game. You know, I still like them as much as the next person, but we don't want to keep talking about that kind of stuff, right? If I did a complete Max fanboy video talking about every cool little thing in Guild Wars 2 that everyone else has just come to appreciate and accept and get over by now, people aren't going to really appreciate it. I do think as audiences get older, in general, people want to discuss how to improve the product, and they want to discuss the small areas within the grand scheme of things that now are nagging them most, you know? You might end up quitting Guild Wars 2 next week because you're so sour about the Zerka meta, right? But that still doesn't nullify the 2,000 hours of happiness you had before that. It's just you don't want to talk about that anymore. And I think that's why, in general, communities can slant to seem a bit more negative unless they have new content and stuff to frequently talk about. I try and walk the line as well as I can. It's funny, though, I feel like I've got kind of a split fan base at the moment where a lot of people think I'm a complete fanboy, have nothing negative to say about Guild Wars 2 at all. And honestly, there are a lot of people with that opinion. And then there's also a lot of other opinions who say stuff like this, like, why do you sound so down all the time? And I think the truth is just you can be very happy about some things and very negative about some other things, and you got to view them as individuals rather than just listen to an opinion about one thing and extrapolate it to the entire game. Like, that's why comments like, oh, Guild Wars 2 is dead just because you personally quit over one small thing is stupid. But it's the internet, people like to take stuff to the extremes, and that's the nature of the beast. Alright, one final question for the Q&A as well here, not really about community or any of that kind of stuff. It's from Higher Sarge. It was a personal message to me that said, I noticed in your last video, this was talking about the Abaddon stuff, something that I'd completely forgot, and that was the Atrocity Library. So for those of you who don't know what this is, it's a location you could find in the Realm of Torment in Guild Wars 1. So this complete plane of existence that had Abaddon imprisoned within it, and also had everything ever remotely associated with him cast down into it as well. There was this place called the Atrocity Atrocity Library that was really just a landmark you could see as a player, but there was no sign next to it saying, this is the Atrocity Library. There was no NPC that just called it the Atrocity Library. There was no actual reference in-game to the name of the place. But if you data mined Guild Wars 1, you could find information about these landmarks and names. So these are debatable as to whether they are canon or not, but at the very least, this is a landmark that exists in-game, and the devs, at least internally, called it the Atrocity Library. Okay, and it has a further description, which I'll go into in a second, but here, let's do the question. So I noticed in your last video something that I completely forgot, and this was the Atrocity Library. This may link in with the idea of Abaddon not being completely one-dimensional evil like the dragons, as you were alluding to. Why this name? We assumed in the original game that Abaddon is evil, simple as, but look at the motives of the people who put it there, the other gods. Surely, if the gods wanted to keep Abaddon as a simple evil person, the best way would be to keep this library in Tyria as an example of Abaddon's evil atrocity, which we could all get behind as a common enemy. But why did the gods not simply paint him as evil, but instead try to hide his existence? This library of atrocities may not be examples committed by him. This could be Abaddon's legacy and proof of atrocities he has witnessed or has knowledge of other races, dragons, even other than the gods. This may be me reading into the whole story too much, but the other gods merely suppressing and hiding Abaddon's ideas from us instead of complete transparency is just too suspicious. Are the gods we worship far less whiter than white, and Abaddon knows this, which will keep in line with your idea that soon he will be painted as a tragic anti-hero? Or is he simply evil and this library is an amalgamation of every terrible deed he has done, and the gods wanted us to have no knowledge of these acts because, well, I can't give a motive for the gods hiding Abaddon's atrocities, can you? I'd love to hear back from you. So, long question. Unfortunately, a lot of it is destroyed immediately because, yes, it's called the Atrocity Library, but in the data you could get a little bit more information, and it's described exactly as this. This contains the names of every victim that was murdered in Abaddon's name, including exactly how they were slain. So there's a whole library of books just filled with names of people who were killed, presumably by the Margarites, Abaddon's chosen people, in his name, okay, perhaps in this big war that ultimately took place. So we do know the contents of the library. It's an interesting discussion, though, as to why the gods did hide it, why they tried so hard to hide Abaddon instead of sort of laying it bare, having the library still on the surface and showing the complete evil that he has unleashed on the world. One thing I did want to add to what I was talking about in the video yesterday is this idea of Abaddon being an unsung hero, or still just leaving it as a shade of grey. Now, I was thinking about this a lot after I posted, but I really don't want to see the story go in the direction as, oh, he was a good guy after all. Now, let me explain that. Yes, it seems kind of cool to flip that on its head, but we still end up having this kind of plastic, obvious story where, oh, there's a good guy. Oh, no, he's not a good guy. He actually ends up being a bad guy. Neither do I really want to see the gods end up taking some generic evil position, right? So what I much would rather we take this story as, if it ultimately becomes true, and how I would love ArenaNet to tell this story, is that the gods simply had a disagreement. And that disagreement was about whether the races living on Tyria were ready to have magic or not and fight the Elder Dragons. At first, all the gods believed that this was true, that they were ready, that they could ultimately fight the Elder Dragons, and they gave them the magic. But when Kindoric made his trek and he said, look at all this evil, look at all of these wars that broke through, we can't handle this. 5 of the gods said, right, okay, fine, we'll take it away, we'll maybe give it back to them a little bit later when these cultures aren't so primitive, while Abaddon believed, no, there is no time to waste, we have to go for this, right? This is the disagreement. And Abaddon's intentions at the time, perhaps, are perfectly morally neutral, right? It's just his idea about how to tackle the situation. He's still allied with the other gods. The ultimate goal is still the same. We don't want the Elder Dragons here. He has noble intent. But they disagreed with him. And we will never know whether Abaddon was actually right or not. You know, the other gods say no, and that's eventually the way that they got, but even if Abaddon had won the war, right, even if they hadn't disagreed with him, what if he was still wrong? What if in ignoring King Doric and his plea and keeping the magic out there, everyone had just destroyed themselves, and the gods would have had to start completely over again, right? They'd be pushed even further back and run out of time before the Elder Dragons rise. He could have been wrong. He may have had an idea, but it may not have been right. And the other thing you have to consider as well is even though he starts at a place where we can understand him, even though he starts where we're maybe on board with him, and this is just his idea, right? ultimately that does not make up for the evil he later commits. We have here the atrocity library, we have all of these people that were slain, this war that he brought to Tyria, just to try and get his own way. We have many examples of truly evil things that he did, torture that he enacted on people, and ultimately, after he was cast into his prison at the very least, all the schemes that he made and the devastation he wrought upon Tyria as he tried to escape again, these were still evil things. Originally, yes, he may have had a good idea, but I think you can keep him as evil, and that's the best way to tell the story. Abaddon has both good and bad in him, and likewise the other gods may have good and bad in them too. Why are they so secretive? Why did they need to have Abaddon the god of secrets, right? Why couldn't they just tell us about the Elder Dragons? Why are we shooting in the dark here? I think eventually the franchise will give us an answer to that question, why they've been so quiet, and maybe the answer to it isn't something we're going to agree with or relate to. You know, the gods may have their reasons, and we may say, well, you were stupid to have these reasons. You were wrong. That's what's nice about this franchise, at least, and one of the reasons why the Guild Wars universe captures me, that many of the gods are fallible, and that's where the excitement kind of comes from. I definitely don't want to propose that Abaddon just becomes, oh, you're the mighty hero. I just think it's cool as a starting place that they have a reasonable disagreement, and then it extrapolates from there. Anyway, there you go, guys. That's the Q&A for today. As I said, I just really wanted to push this out, test some FPS stuff in Guild Wars 2. Hopefully we'll get some higher frames and better stuff, and just to talk to you guys a little bit about what's going on. Tons of stuff, in short, and we'll just muddle through it as best we can. A quick reminder as well, I don't often do this, I am on Twitter. You can find a link in the description there. Really easy to contact me. Ask me any questions you like there, or down in the comments section below. As I said, we didn't really have any good ones last week, so anything you've got, guys, I'll be sure to have a read, and they could appear in next week's Q&A. Thanks very much. There'll be Mythbusters tomorrow. I'll see you next time.